podcast fans. Welcome to the Youth Justice Transformation in Action podcast, a space for youth-serving stakeholders. We are the RFK National Resource Center for Juvenile Justice, and we are on a mission to transform the youth justice system by partnering with people like you who are passionate about improving outcomes for youth, families, and communities you serve. The National Resource Center provides field-based technical assistance through cultivated partnerships with state and local youth-serving leaders and practitioners. And it's designed to improve child welfare and juvenile justice system performance so that each young person may experience a future free from involvement in either system and realize unlimited positive growth opportunities. Our work in more than 60 jurisdictions since our launch in 2013 is built upon research and ample evidence of results that undeniably supports that what you will learn in this podcast series will be critical to our current and future efforts to improve the lives of our nation's young people. In this podcast series, you will hear from experts in the field and on the ground who have championed reform on the local, state, and national level. We are your hosts. I'm Jody Martin.
I'm John Tuell.
And I'm Michelle Darling. During this episode, Leadership in Times of Change, John will interview our inaugural guest, Adolphus Graves, court administrator from Cobb County, Georgia. Adolphus will highlight the importance of leadership, change management, and outcomes achieved through the probation system review process. Without further ado, John, take it away.
Thank you, Michelle. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our initial podcast. I'd also like to introduce Adolphus Graves, our inaugural and very special guest to the conversation today. Adolphus, could you introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about you and your title and your role?
Absolutely. First and foremost, thank you so much for having me to participate in today's podcast. I'm really excited about the opportunity to have this discussion and always excited to talk about the amazing work that I've been fortunate enough to participate in with your organization and all the outcomes that have come along with it. I currently serve as the court administrator for Cobb County Juvenile Court, which is in just northwest of Atlanta, Georgia. We're a metro Atlanta suburban county, approximately between 700 and a million residents, upside of 750, probably around there. And have been here about 3 years, coming up on 3 years. And have been fortunate to work in a couple of different capacities in Metro Atlanta with other juvenile court jurisdictions in similar roles. Was the chief probation officer for Fulton County Juvenile Court for just under a decade, which is the city of Atlanta and surrounding municipalities. And prior to that, spent about 11 years on the south side of Metro Atlanta in Clayton County Juvenile Court. Fortunate enough to work with the state of Georgia on a couple of key initiatives. On the state advisory group as a member there for quite some time, as well as being able to participate on the federal advisory committee on juvenile justice as well as a member of our SAG here in Georgia. Just completed my first term on the FACJ and looking forward to hopefully another term coming up here soon. And just consider myself to be a public servant in the realm of juvenile justice in finding ways to improve our outcomes of safety, of child outcomes, of family outcomes, and just overall child welfare as a whole. So I hope that some of my work here, not just in Georgia, but in other jurisdictions as well, just leads to better outcomes for children who touch juvenile justice systems at various touch points. So I think that's me. And thank you again for having me today, John.
Oh, terrific. Adolphus, it's great to have you with us. I think as you recount that experience, it's a great combination of local, state, and federal experience. And of course, we've come to know that it's based upon your passion and concern for the communities, the families, and the youth in which you work. It's really a privilege to have you with us, Adolphus. We appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I think I'd want to seek a small window into the person that I've come to know. I did get the privilege of knowing about your work and work with you in partnership in both Fulton County and now in Cobb County. And I'm seeking a small window into what I've come to know about you over the last decade. And that's really, why do you do what you do?
Wow, John, why I do what I do, I hope that I like to think that it continues to evolve. I think I first started out because of the observations that I had early on in life that A lot of children were caught up in or involved in both the juvenile justice system and child welfare system that I knew, and didn't seem like they received the attention that was deserving of young adults. In my early teen years and high school years, it just didn't seem like there was always the attention that was necessary given to helping them to redirect their lives. I didn't intend on working in this area. I thought I was going to be a business owner. Started out in business management, but again, was redirected by doing some community level work as required in my undergrad at Morehouse College, and working in communities in areas of just general adolescent development. And again, saw the common theme of a lot of the children that were in distress. They and or their families were too frequently involved with the juvenile justice system, and didn't necessarily know how to get out or even how to take advantage of the opportunities that were presented there. And so really, again, just trying to respond to the needs of the clients to really help maximize community safety by really engaging in helping to equip children that touch the system and need support beyond just the punitive measures of the system to really be able to redirect their own lives and hopefully achieve their own dreams in a pro-social manner. And I think I found some success in doing that and bringing some ideas to the system that weren't necessarily considered when I first started out. We started out doing community service programs down in Clayton County, Georgia. When I first started, that was actually my first advancement from being a probation officer, was in a program capacity, and just coming up with non-traditional ways in which to connect with children and families beyond what we were doing at that time, which was really just a lot of drug screening and assessing school connectivity and school attendance. So I found success there, and using some of that creativity, I think it sparked me to try to use more of what God blessed me with to be able to help that population in a more creative way.
That's a wonderful response, Adolphus. And that very response highlights some mutual pathways that you and I have. As I mentioned, that practitioner experience plus that managerial or leadership and change experience. And we both know through those experiences, they can be very challenging, very wearing, for lack of a better description. What motivates your continued involvement in light of those consistent challenges, working with youth and families, and now in your current position, working with in a leadership position? So what motivates your continued involvement and commitment, Adolphus?
That's a great question, John. And I think that probably leads to why I say I try to seek motivation out every day and annually try to reassess what that motivation is to make sure, one, that I'm grounded to that original desire to really help children and families, because it is very easy in an administrative capacity to lose sight of the direct contact that's so important in this field. Having to deal with the human, the relational aspects, the human resource aspects of the work, everything from all the budget management, the fiscal responsibilities. It's easy to lose sight of why you really do this work. So I have found motivation in probably like the last 5 to 8 years in really trying to inspire others to also bring their creative solutions to the space, and trying to really ignite in others maybe a new form of their own passion and how it can be added to the context of what juvenile justice looks like now. So really just trying to motivate other leaders that I identify at different levels, and giving them as much information as possible that maybe I didn't have at certain times about career pathways, about educational pathways, to really just try to expand any hopes of impact that I could have by really engaging and empowering others, and then hopefully giving them what they need as well as leaders in the space to overcome some obstacles to whatever their hopes and dreams are within the field or within the profession also.
Adolphus, that is a wonderful answer. I would add to the skills you spoke of that are so evident in the way you work with your staff and colleagues. A leader in your position must be willing to be an active listener and effective communicator, while consistently displaying your passion for the youth you serve. I also believe that our youth justice leaders must demonstrate the courage to examine opportunities for change. I think most of us would agree there are multiple areas within our system that require or can benefit from transformative change on behalf of our youth and our communities. To that end, you entered your present position as the Cobb County Juvenile Court was considering the recommendations that the RFK National Resource Center had offered after the conduct of a probation system review. As you know, we've collaborated with more than 45 state or local jurisdictions nationwide using guidance delivered in our seminal probation system review guidebook, the third edition. I want to describe briefly the focus of these intensive system reviews, as I hope it'll assist our listeners in understanding the environment and context for change you inherited. Using the principles of adolescent and positive youth development as a foundation and applying the core purposes of the youth justice system, accountability, positive behavior change to reduce risk for reoffending, and community safety, we review and analyze four major elements of probation and the juvenile justice system, including administrative and management practices, probation and court operations, interagency collaboration, incorporating attorney and judicial practice, and quality assurance that ensures capacity to measure system results and youth outcomes. Fundamental to this review process is adherence to research, best practice evidence, and local subject matter expertise at the leadership and practitioner level. Our findings and recommendations inform short-term reform opportunities and guide a long-term path forward for sustainable system improvements. We've provided implementation TA support under your leadership for the past 18 months, Adolphus. As the new court administrator in Cobb County, did that provide you opportunities and challenges as you assumed your leadership position?
Absolutely. Coming on board, there were a lot of pros and cons to you all having already conducted the assessment and walking into an environment where a lot of work had gone into identifying a lot of the, not just issues, but pros and cons and challenges and opportunities that existed for the organization. That was one of the reasons that I was excited about engaging with this organization, taking on this opportunity. But honestly, once you got in the seat, there were some real challenges that I had not considered. And one of those, which I believe is really important for other jurisdictions or looking at something like this or may apply in other areas, is when you walk into that environment, it seems, in some instances that every individual has their own individual idea of what the priority should be or what the priority should look like, or where the work should start and what we should focus on the front end. And those varying ideas don't always align, even sometimes within, the leadership within the organization, much less mine and how I see it. So that was somewhat of a challenge. And I think there were 30 plus recommendations. And out of the 30 plus recommendations, we were like, how do we start to take a bite out of this apple? And we eventually scaled it down and prioritized, and we came up with three primary areas of focus that we were going to start on and develop subcommittees around those three focus areas. But there was a lot of work that went into, again, identifying those priorities and then also assigning actionable items and steps, what we were going to do and how we were going to actually develop our metrics and our markers to find out what success would look like. That in and of itself took a solid 8 to 12 months just to even get to those three priority areas.
And I think it's important for our audience to know that this is for those of us who are impatient, I being chief among them, in this change process, it takes great patience to not only endure the challenges, but to overcome them, to achieve what we seek to achieve in this justice system transformation. Adolphus, I've had the privilege of working with you during that time. I want to ask how your leadership style supports the arrival at the priorities and the movement forward to overcome the challenges, your particular leadership style, because I think we'll have listeners that are similar to you in a leadership position, and we'll also have listeners who are supervisors and practitioners who are part of the process, but maybe not in that leadership position. I think your answer will benefit both. So how's your leadership style support these changes?
Yeah, so I believe, my style is probably, I like to align it with something I learned in the criminal justice aspect of my education, is more so like situational and transformational, right? And I'll start with the latter. And transformational is that I'm really coming in to really identify not just Band-Aids or short-term solutions, but pathways towards like long-term success that can be sustained beyond changes in administration, sustain beyond my tenure in the organization, and that can really lead to like a pathway that can outline, again, attainable metrics and outcome measures and so forth to impact the community as a whole. So that's the transformational aspect of it. Situational, again, not just situational in response to the cases that we're receiving, not just situational in response to those changes in administration that we talked about, elected official turnover, things of that nature, but also situational to the employees that you have. When you come into an organization or when you step into a role of leadership in juvenile justice such as this, you have to remember and remind yourself quite frequently that the system, which is pretty large and pretty big and a big thing, is made up of people. And if you can help your staff to really feel like they, as the people, are larger than the system, then that is the first step to actually being able to achieve some of those transformational outcomes. And how you do that requires a lot of work and attention. So we may have had those recommendations in line, but I also had to take time during the 8 to 12 months to really learn what motivated my employees, how they wanted to be coached as senior managers. A lot of them have been in the work for quite some time. And then also deal with, it's a real thing. Some folks, once you come on board and you start talking change, you're going to have some transition in position. Some folks are just going to say, this isn't my cup of tea, or I'm going to go ahead and retire at this point. And how you even manage that change is a lot bigger than just that one individual. So when I say situational, I mean being able to respond and to prioritize attention to the individuals within the organization just as much, if not more at times, than the actual progress of the system and the organization, because you can't do this work alone. No matter how effective of an administrator or director you may be, you will not be able to really achieve those sustainable outcomes without a solid group of leaders working alongside you and really trying to meet those metrics.
Adolphus, I think you've highlighted a couple of things that we've come to learn in our work across the country. I want to just amplify those. And that's, as a leader, you have to pay attention to the unique needs of your employees. You have to have a communication stream that allows you to have concern for their enduring of the change that alters the way they may have practiced their work for a decade or more. I've witnessed you and your leadership team do that effectively. And I just wanted to amplify that that's such an important aspect in an environment that often leads us to hearing from leaders like you, well, I've got so much day-to-day crisis that I have to deal with. I can't pay attention to that. I would want to highlight for the audience that, Adolphus, you've managed to balance that, and that's a key to the success. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And by no means, when I say prioritizing the needs of the employees, do I mean not being or holding them accountable or not being intentional about having shared accountability within the organization. Even though that is a big part of it, there have to be some accountability standards and measures in place, but it really helps when the managers or the leaders are a part of developing those accountability measures. That's really important so that it's a balance and it never gets lost in, too much of me, but it's more of us as an organization and what our organization is going to emphasize and prioritize as far as staff performance. And so just really, again, more pulling than pushing in regards to bringing folks along with you to a space of shared accountability. And then, of course, when it happens, it has to happen. However, no one should be running from progressive disciplinary action. Folks really should feel that their environment promotes running towards positive outcomes and the attainment of positive outcomes instead of running from disciplinary action, which too often is the case in some justice-related systems.
Very important for the audience to hear, in my humble estimation. And you've mentioned it. I want you to speak just a little bit about the importance of those stakeholder relationships in the change process. And specifically here, we point a lot to the attorneys, the judges, the community agencies. Could you comment on your perspective on how important those roles are?
I think it goes without saying, and I think most of us are familiar enough with the significance of our collaborative partners in helping us to move the needle in a lot of these areas of the work. I think sometimes we underestimate the importance of pace and timing. And that doesn't mean pace to be relaxed or pace to say that we're not going to be assertive in developing some of these spaces, or some of these efforts in some of these spaces. But the pace of understanding and being cognizant of the pace of some of our partners. Because too often we're just caught in a cycle as agencies that we don't necessarily understand what the shared alignment of our organizations really looks like, because we're too caught up in the day-to-day. And then so we end up in, I know this is a cliche term, but we end up in our silos, but it's really because we're trying to respond to our own individual occurrences, whether that be school partners, attorneys, law enforcement, like we're dealing with our own individual things that don't always cross sectors. And so we get stuck in that thing that it doesn't require you to be there. And then we can often misalign some attention to our own thing as opposed to our shared thing. And too often we just get lost in that shuffle, and time can pass pretty quickly that you lose attention given to the shared alignment of the work from the collaborative partners, unintentionally.
And I would share with the audience that you gave me the opportunity to meet with your judges when I was last down in Cobb County, and recognized how you've brought them along, made them partners in the change process, given them voice, and recognized their authority and their discretion in their own role. And I think that's a key, not just to the judiciary, but to the attorneys and to all our collaborative partners. And I think I would amplify the fact that you've paid the kind of attention you've spoken to reflect that it's an absolute necessity. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I think that's where the extra time is spent in roles such as mine that isn't typically highlighted, is in having those conversations and getting to know the individual goals of not just your judges, but yes, in that instance, all of my judges have different objectives that I want to help them to achieve. And so taking the time to sit down and learn those, and then trying to find spaces and ways in which we can move forward together and be respectful of the differences. So even if there are times when we're not all on the same page, we can kind of move in a space of consensus that's been built in those conversations and respectfully maneuver until we get to the next space. And you don't do that without having personal conversations with regards to the professional work, not just with your judges, but with your partners as well, especially when new folks come on, when elections happen. How do you what's your initial conversation with the newly elected district attorney? What's your initial conversation with the newly hired or promoted chief of police? How you engage with those partners really needs to go beyond just the realm of, I'm the court administrator, you're the chief of police, I'm the court administrator, you're the district attorney, but really are there ways that I can help you to achieve your outcomes related to juvenile justice and vice versa?
And I think from my perspective, I would share for the audience, you have paid the kind of attention that has allowed those relationships to benefit the transformation process that you're leading in Cobb County. I'm going to transition just a little bit myself, Adolphus, and humility is part of the very attractive part of your both personal and professional nature. And I think it might be easier for you to say you haven't done this on your own because of that. So let me just ask, what tools or resources have you used to support your transformation efforts?
Yeah, absolutely. Staying in touch and in contact with folks such as yourself, John, is again, a key part of the work. Folks that are lifetime learners and always willing to really assess not just my own space, but just to assess the work as a whole and assess the trends and what the data is suggesting, what the evidence is suggesting, and just staying in tune with the evolution of the science behind why we're doing what we're doing. And because evidence-based practice is not always about just what works; it's about what doesn't work as well, and helping you to avoid some costly mistakes that other folks have been through as well. So I'm fortunate enough to have a good number of networks of folks that are, again, I think there are some humble warriors in this space that really put organization, agency, and the field beyond them. I mean, beyond themselves, or they prioritize that beyond themselves, and trying to stay connected to the national organizations, like not assuming or making sure you stay connected with OJJDP, American Probation Parole Association, staying connected with large organizations as well as local organizations and state level organizations to really stay engaged, and colleges and universities as well.
Just let me add a little bit to that, if I could, Adolphus. That's a key, I think, to success as we've seen this implemented in jurisdictions across the country. All those points you raised, certainly the science around change management and implementation of change in policy and practice in all directions, right to left in the organization, up to down in the organization, in all directions. But I just want to raise, before I ask you another question about the results of your work, the fact that you have also sought mentorship from among peers across the country. Some might not think of that as an active strategy and maybe find it uncomfortable to reach out to folks you don't know. But if you learn from your colleagues how they work through some of these barriers and obstacles, then it's worthwhile. And I'm just going to ask for a yes or no. It's worthwhile to reach out to those colleagues who are experiencing that same or similar change process and learn from there, as you say, both the things you should do and the things that you may not engage in that will undermine your success. Just a yes or no, you support that kind of outreach?
Absolutely, yes.
So, Adolphus, we've talked a lot about the leadership, some of the structure, some of the pieces of that, some of the collaborators. In the end, we want to know whether or not this is producing the change. And most importantly, I'm asking you right now, can you identify some of the positive outcomes from your transformational efforts?
Absolutely. Just one thing I'd like to highlight, though, John, in being able to achieve the outcomes that I'm about to discuss, it is so important that leaders, again, directors, administrators, senior managers, really emphasize the significance of, I don't want to be right. I want my outcomes to affect in a positive manner the children there. I want my outcomes to be right. I want it to be less about what I want and what have you. What I have found in a lot of organizations, that's not the traditional desire of administrators and directors, and that's not always what is expected by employees. They want to know, what do you think? What should we do? Tell us how we should move and what have you. And that's actually the antithesis of what I hope to bring to an organization, because I have found it to be so detrimental to the even capacity for success when leaders come in and say, this is my way in the juvenile justice space, and you all need to subscribe to my beliefs and my approach to doing it. Even something as simple as a actual policy and procedure guide or initiative that's driven solely by that administrator is, to me, so detrimental, because it allows the staff to not bring their experience, not bring their perspective, and not bring their value to the table, but instead remain dormant in that whole process of trying to achieve better outcomes, which to me is a travesty that we don't have, as much of that in a lot of spaces that I unfortunately still see.
Let me just interrupt for just a second and just make sure that the audience hears that. Our experience is that is critical, that recognition that it is a collaborative that is bringing about the system change. And the more everyone is engaged in that process, involved in the change process, they can make long-term commitments to the practices, the policies, and the impact that they can have. And I think it really is critical for us to understand in this transformation of youth, and you've done this so well, you've given voice to everyone who is impacted by the changes that you're trying to promote and lead. And that does take some selflessness in our leadership position. And it certainly takes a great awareness, in my estimation, that this is not about what we want, as you said, Adolphus. It's about what's best for the youth and for the system's performance to achieve those outcomes for the youth. You've done a marvelous job at leading your staff. I've been witness to that, and I appreciate you really raising that in response to my inquiry.
Absolutely. So just to touch on the direct question that you asked, probably the most transformative aspect of our work currently is our approach to changing our intake process to include risk and need assessment at an earlier point of contact than previously. And so traditionally on the back end, you would get to more so of the risk assessment post disposition on cases, but we've been able to back that up with the support of our judges and our attorneys to even the point of intake and identifying ways now in which we can not just divert some of those cases, but give some informal attention to those cases in a way that addresses their needs at the earliest point possible, which also gives us the capacity to strengthen our informal case processing as a whole. One of the areas in which we were already operating was informally adjusting a good number of low-level misdemeanor cases, but being able to build upon that, saying that wasn't enough. Like, what can we learn about the needs of these children that we are diverting to really help them to be able to desist from any future involvement with the activity that brought them to our doorsteps in the first place? So if we're diverting them where? And diverting them to what? That has been a big win for us. Also, one of those three key areas that we talked about was defining the role of probation. We actually have a subcommittee that's built around defining the role of probation and what juvenile probation means and looks like here in Cobb County, Georgia. Quite often, a lot of folks or opponents of work such as this will say, well, we don't want the ideas of other folks. Like, you really allowed us to maintain the emphasis on making this truly a Cobb County initiative that was going to be impactful here. So ensuring that the probation staff understood, look, this is a requirement that you need to bring to the table. What do you think probation is now? Why do you think you're here? And why do you think you should do anything differently going forward? And then so kind of keeping those things in mind as we started to introduce new principles of transformative probation really helped to push them beyond, just the day-to-day work of case management and responding to new offenses and, opening and closing cases and so forth. Those are two big ones as far as like case processing. But most important for me is that I believe that we've been able to impact the culture of communication within the organization. When we now have managers that are actively engaged in asking questions, bringing ideas to the table, that 2 years ago when I started, were kind of off in their corners with their heads down, just saying, just tell me where to put this next case, or just tell me where this file goes, or what have you, and or tell me how to close out this case. Them actually bringing ideas to the table now, I believe, is empowering for them and has added immensely to the value of our operations, because it now has brought years of experience that were, again, just kind of sitting relatively idle, processing paperwork and just processing the case management standards without bringing their value. So taking that time to kind of change that culture and emphasize that, and that's what my expectation is, and then actually watching that come to fruition, to me, has been the most impactful, because I really believe we're going to, change the way that things are done here well beyond my time here.
Adolphus, great answer to highlight those three areas. I want to give you a chance to even highlight one more. Fundamentally, the research and the evidence suggests that scientifically validated risk needs responsivity instruments help us in making decisions about the reduction of risk and matched treatment of services interventions for youth. You've made a strong commitment to that, and you've built another one of your implementation committees around effective implementation with fidelity that's sustainable and measurable. Could you comment on that a little bit around your implementation of YLS?
So we did not have a validated risk and needs instrument when I first came on board. They have been looking at a couple. Of course, we went through the procurement process and identified one. But honestly, John, I think what has been more important than identifying and selecting an instrument to use has been our commitment to the training on the front end and slowing the process down enough to ensure that folks understood all the different aspects of the work, from interviewing, from scoring fidelity, really just being able to prioritize the learning that needs to take place to effectively be able to utilize this tool long-term has been, in my mind, more significant than which tool we selected.
Which is why, I'm sorry, why you raised it led to my question, Adolphus. Really, you mentioned the who, what, and why. You've taken the time in introducing, implementing, training, and measuring the policies and practices that are part of your change process to engage all of your stakeholders and all of your staff in the who, what, and why. It makes it a lot easier for you to drive that change in culture that gets a greater culture of collaboration around the implementation of those practices. So I'm glad you characterized it that way. I see you ready to comment further. Please share.
Well, I'll just say, I'll tell you, John, it is tough. And I think most leaders in this space will agree with me that it's tough to slow the pace down enough to emphasize that, because again, in organizations where we're used to just saying, give me my marching orders and I'll do it, tell me what you want done, to say, no, we need to slow down and we're assessing individual, really competencies, and are you getting what we are offering, and saying we're not going live until we have this level of success with scoring and what have you. It's tough. And employees sometimes will say, well, why are we still doing this? It's not, the longer you take, the more opportunities you have also for other occurrences to take place that might contradict the way that they think that we're going. Yeah. And so again, it's tough to maintain the line there. But again, I believe that's one of the ways that I truly hope that the work that I've done in other organizations that still sustains and is in place to this day. I think that hopefully is a hallmark of my work, is that we're talking long-term success, outcome, and capacity to be able to address these children's needs to keep us all safe by doing so.
So in our last couple of minutes, Adolphus, given what you just said, as you look forward, if you could change one thing about the youth justice system, what would that be?
Oh man, John, the financial support is there. Sometimes it's a little too difficult to be able to access in a long-term and sustainable manner. It would be less reliance on grant-funded opportunities. It would be less reliance on initiatives and things of that nature, and really more so focused on the needs of the children to really help our society to be able to improve by the way we touch and address these children and their families. That will be my biggest change. I know everybody says, well, money wouldn't make it better, but money managed and used in the right way to really address these needs. A lot of times we spend way too much effort that really should be focused on addressing these children's needs and trying to be able to identify funding streams and resources. And because it all looks so different in different jurisdictions, different states, different counties, and what have you, I think there are often opportunities that are missed to really improve systems based on some of the red tape that's involved with funding. So again, not to simplify the process, but maybe a more consistent way to access support for families, whether that be through financial resources and or non-financial. Also, just access and better system alignment to really minimize the difference that's paid to children that are involved with juvenile justice systems, and making that any different than children that are non-juvenile justice involved. Like really treating children as children, not as juvenile delinquents or juvenile probationers or juvenile dependents, but really getting to the heart of treating children that have touched the court with that same passion and fervor that we do in response to children that are non-court involved when they fall upon poor decision-making and challenges.
I can only add to that from my own perspective. I think what you've just spoken about is consistent with the legacy of Robert F. Kennedy when he says that we would wish that our country would treat and provide an opportunity for every youth as if they were our own. Certainly, your answer gives some insight to the fact that our troubled and challenged and vulnerable youth are often marginalized in that funding arena. And I would certainly join with you in making that call for what you just described in response to that question. Let me close out by saying this, Adolphus. Other than the multitude of thank yous for sharing your wisdom, experience, and knowledge with our audience, but Based on your experience, and I think obviously your accrued wisdom and the lessons you've learned in all your experience over the past several years, let me give you the opportunity to share a final message with which you would leave the audience about justice.
Yeah, first and foremost, John, I want to thank you for being one of those mentors that has allowed me to have access to not just you, but all that you know as well. That can't be, we can't give enough attention to that, the value of that, and learning from those that have gone before us in the work, and really trying to infuse as much of that as possible into the work that we're doing today, and not trying to tackle it on our own. But I just think that same charge is what really helps us to maximize our outcomes in any arena as it relates to juvenile justice or justice involved children as a whole, is having a humility around the limitations of our role. We touch these children's lives for just a small blip of their lifespan. And so with that, understanding how important it is that we do it right during that short period of time, because if we don't, then we just extend that period of time that they're involved with justice systems and diminish their opportunity to really live long, healthy and productive lives that they want to live. So just staying connected to folks such as yourself, and staying connected to the literature, staying connected to the learning that's required to improve our capacity for system improvement as well. And so again, thank you and the organization for all that you all do, for the commitment and introduction of so many other folks as well, that I can pick up that phone in a lot of jurisdictions and learn so much from others. And just so for you just being a facilitator of knowledge and a connector of wisdom that spans not just across the country, but across the globe, and helping to shrink this world of juvenile justice and making it all attainable, and providing me access to touch so many parts of our country I wouldn't be able to without you.
Well, it is truly a team effort in so many ways, and certainly the RFK National Resource Center has a team of staff and consultants that are part of that thanks that you just offered.
Absolutely.
Adolphus Graves, Court Administrator, Cobb County Juvenile Court, thank you. I appreciate you joining us today.